Today we're at the Merville gun battery, just a few miles east of Sword Beach, and we're here to take a look at one of the key positions that the British paratroopers had to capture in the early hours of D-Day. So today we're at the Merville gun battery. So where we're positioned here is just a few miles east of Sword Beach, and we've talked about Pegasus Bridge and the importance of capturing that objective. Well, this was another important objective that the British 6th Airborne were going to be parachuting in on to try to capture it prior to the landings at Sword Beach. Aerial reconnaissance suggested that this gun battery here held some big 150mm guns. Those would have the potential to fire directly on Sword Beach from this position, and as such it was important to capture this prior to those landings starting on Sword Beach. So as we've talked about with our video at Pegasus Bridge, this area, Ranville, Merville, British paratroopers from the 6th Airborne were getting dropped in this entire area. The problem was down here by Merville is things were not going to go to plan. Poor visibility meant that lots of men missed their drop zones. Damaged communications equipment such as radios meant they couldn't communicate properly when they were on the ground. So this entire area really was chaos. But nonetheless, the men pulled together and they knew the importance of this objective. So they started to move up towards the Merville gun battery. They actually approached it from the sort of southeast direction, which is kind of out here ahead of us, to capture the gun position here. Now, today they have like a visitor centre and a museum, so some really cool stuff. So we're just going to really kind of explore, take a look around and show you some of the cool stuff they've got here, whilst at the same time we'll tell a little bit of the story of what happened here at the Merville battery. Let's go take a look. So when you come in, one of the first sort of areas that they direct you to is this hangar where they've got some aircraft and stuff, but right out the front is this huge Douglas C-47 Dakota. Now this wasn't actually involved in the assault on Merville here, it's sort of here as an example. We can't get any closer than this unfortunately, but there it is. That is really impressive, right outside the front of the hangar here. So when you come into the hangar here, they just have a few sort of different bits. They've got like a bit of a diorama set up with some German defences. This is a German, I think, a 20mm cannon. A big old searchlight. So they would have had searchlights like this in batteries like this to try to spot incoming British aeroplanes. But just a couple of cool little bits that they've got here. Let's just take a look and see what this gun is. This is a 20mm German cannon. The actual guns out here in the gun battery would have been substantially bigger than this, but this is an example of a 20mm cannon. Right, let's go and see what else we can see. Now we are the last week in May here in Normandy, and it is the 80th anniversary of D-Day in just a few days. That's why I'm here this week, because next week it is going to be crazy all around here. That means that there's some stuff which isn't original here on the site. For example, this huge grandstand. They're obviously preparing for some big 80th anniversary D-Day events in almost all of the sites across Normandy. So that means there is some disruption going on. Doesn't stop us taking a look around, but that's why there is a huge grandstand here preparing for their event here at Merville on the 6th of June. Now, due to all the chaos that we've talked about with men being dropped all over the place, of the 700 men who were originally dropped into this area, only about 150 of them were going to get to this point here at Merville in order to be involved in the attack. That meant that they were heavily undermanned in order to capture this position, but nonetheless the assault went ahead and they moved through and managed to capture this battery. Now, the Germans who were here were actually totally overrun. Unfortunately, at that stage of D-Day there wasn't much room for taking prisoners. It was a very chaotic situation and the men had to be moving on to their next objective very quickly. Sadly, that meant that of the 120 German defenders who were on this site, only about 20 of them would survive D-Day. So this position was captured, and it was only about 2 hours later, 7:25 AM, when men would start landing on Sword Beach and the Allied invasion was underway. So when you come out onto the site here, this is the first big casemate that you run into. Now this is casemate number 1. This was the first built and actually the largest of the 4 casemates on site. You can see we've got some other ones over here which we're going to get to in a minute. But this is casemate number 1. Now this would have housed on D-Day a 100mm gun, and that's something which we should actually talk about. So we talked about the fear that this gun battery held 150mm guns that could be fired directly on Sword Beach. Now, when the men moved into this position to capture it, they actually identified it didn't have those big guns. It had some older Czech guns, slightly smaller guns, like the 100mm cannon that was in this casemate right here. Now, those still were important gun positions to capture. They could still do damage, of course, on the Allied troops moving in, but it isn't the big 150mm cannons that they were expecting to find here at the Merville battery.
Now, unfortunately, due to like the audio shows and darkness and stuff, it was almost impossible to record inside these bunkers. But to give you an idea of what's going on there, so all of the doors on all of these bunkers are heavily defended with these machine gun positions. And on the back of each bunker, you have a door like this, a large door that the gun could be wheeled in. So it would come through kind of this part and then along this like big long track down into the front, where it would then poke out of the gun port where the German soldiers would have been manning the gun and looking out. You can imagine the noise that would have echoed around these bunkers. It just would have been crazy. Imagine just the deafening sound if you were inside them.
So round to the right hand side, this would have been like a guard room where some of the men could have been. They've got some little dioramas set up again in here, some stuff to do with like medics, and something which I quite like over here. They've got something which shows a German medic treating the wound of a British paratrooper. Something which would have happened. It's cool that they're showing that there. So one of the things that you can see when you come here to Merville is these kind of open sort of gun emplacements. Now there's a few of these around the site, and then of course you've got the actual big casemates as well. Now these ones here are kind of the original gun positions that they had, but of course those were too open to attack, especially aerial bombardment. And so these larger casemates were built and the larger guns were moved inside the casemates. Now where we are right now is at the back. Of course these all point in this kind of direction, which looks out towards the coastline and towards Sword Beach. We're going to go take a look at the front and see where the guns poke out in a second. This is casemate number 2. Let's move down and have a look. So we're just moving up towards casemate number 3 ahead of us here, and again you see this kind of older gun emplacement here where the gun was then moved into the casement. But before we go in there, we can go and take a look on top of casemate number 2. So let's go and see what we can see from up here. So as we move up onto casemate number 2, you can see the big grandstand again over here. So I was just talking to somebody. It sounds like they're doing like a big reenactment thing here, which I guess they'll use the different placements for. That's probably what some of this earthworks and stuff is for as well. I'm not going to be here for that, but I'm sure that will be interesting. Right, we are on top of casemate number 2. Okay, so from the top of casemate number 2 here, you get a really good view across. So this is casemate number 1 where we started off, and you can see this is where the gun would have come out, looking across towards the coastline and across towards Sword Beach. On the top here, they have some information panels and stuff that tell you a little bit about what's going on here. Below us here is where the gun would have come out for casemate number 2, out in this direction, and over here we've got 3, and then over there is casemate number 4. So as we've already talked about, on D-Day, the 9th Parachute Battalion were tasked with capturing this area. They did so, but took heavy casualties, and from there they had to then use all of their men here to move on to their second objective a couple of miles away. The Germans took advantage of that and moved back in and recaptured this position and started to activate the guns again. So on the 7th of June, men from number 3 Commando were sent back in here to recapture this position, which they managed to as well. So from the 6th to 7th of June, this was captured by the British, recaptured by the Germans, and then had to be recaptured again by the British commandos here at Merville. Okay, so to get over to where casemate number 4 is, you have to move through this little tunnel underneath the road. Now, they would have had stuff like this here in order to maintain the roadway above. That would be so they could move their vehicles without them getting in the way of kind of the defensive trench positions. And that's why they have this underneath the roadway here. Right, as we come out the other side, we should be able to see, again as with the other casemates, the original gun position, which is over here ahead of us. So when you look at these casemates, you can see this is the back side, and the front is heavily mounded with earth. Of course, this was to try to defend them from aerial bombardments, and of course naval guns out at sea that would be firing in this way to try to destroy the battery. So I hope you guys enjoyed this one, taking a look around the Merville gun battery. I certainly did. It's really cool to be able to see the different casemates and have a look around the sites and see inside some of them as well. If you did enjoy it, do me a favour, do all the usual YouTuber stuff for me. At the same time, if you'd like to support the channel, you know, you guys who do support the channel, I'm so grateful, and it helps me come and do stuff like this to create more videos. If you'd like to, you can see some of the links in the description. You can support me on Patreon. You can buy me a coffee as well if you would like to. I appreciate it for all of you guys who do. In the meantime, guys, thanks for watching. I'm going to see you on the next one.